Welcome back to Buried Cinema. I'm Kevin.
I'm Steve.
I'm Nate.
I'm Brian.
We are a weekly podcast that likes to do new and buried films, sometimes just buried films. We like to dig past the surface of the film and look at what's underneath. This week, we looked at two vampire movies, Thirst and Stakeland. Both different takes on the vampire story, something that's been told
like opposites of the spectrum,
dozens and dozens of times by different cultures. That's one of the things we're going to touch on. But the first one we're going to look at is Thirst, 2009 movie by director Chan-wook Park. Apparently he is very well known, very good director in the Korean scene. I haven't seen as much as some other people, apparently.
What would you compare him to? Like he's not like the Spielberg because he's too edgy for Spielberg.
No. I would compare him maybe
Tarantino.
I would think Tarantino's
like the Korean
comparison.
Tarantino.
Yeah, he doesn't have the pulp feel of Tarantino.
No. Well, we don't know that. Maybe culturally it is.
Culturally, yeah, but I think he'd be closest to Tarantino.
All right.
And actually, Eli Roth was a big reason why he came to America. Who's Tarantino's one of Tarantino's proteges. So Eli Roth was a big.
I don't like Eli Roth, so that kind of disappoints me.
But his criticism actually on Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is really fascinating.
Really?
Yeah, and he actually said that it's Chan-wook Park inspired Eli Roth to go and make his own horror films.
Interesting.
That says a lot. That's good. This is my first Korean, probably my first Korean.
We haven't done it.
We did one.
What do we do?
Man from Nowhere.
We did The Man from Nowhere.
We've done.
Oh,
one.
you weren't here for Man from Nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but honestly, this it was an interesting movie. BK. It was an interesting movie. Thirst. I'm always up for a good horror. Different take for myself, but we're gonna go.
Make sure you pronounce that last.
Oh,
R.
tell him the plot.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
When you say you're always up for a good horror,
Yeah,
make sure you enunciate
horror. Yeah.
Horror. Okay. I'm always up for good horror.
Yeah.
All right. So sorry.
Start getting some emails. Well, I know a place.
Call this number. I heard something on the radio.
This is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe.
Not that one, but no. Anyway, Thirst out in 2009. It's the main character is a priest going into this, and through as I said, failed medical experiment, the priest is stricken with vampirism. And
he gets a blood transfusion with vampire blood.
He takes it upon himself because he wants to help people before he succumbs to everything. He goes to what seems to be his mentor, a blind gentleman who you see who pops up and actually becomes a pivotal person in the film, and says that he wants to go to this, I don't know, I want to say commune, but I don't think it's a commune, so to speak, to volunteer his body to see if it can beat this virus that only kills. Oh, I can't remember the two races.
It was killing Caucasians and Asians.
Yeah.
Was it Asian?
Wasn't it only men?
And only men and missionaries. Yeah. Seriously.
No, silenced. Sorry.
Right.
It's the damn Red Cross. They keep bugging me for blood. Speaking of blood, they keep bugging me for blood, and I keep hanging up on them.
Yeah.
Why'd you give them your real phone number?
I don't know.
I could have told you they would have done that.
Speaking of vampires.
Yeah. So anyway, they at one point you think the main character dies, but then they give him a last-minute blood transfusion, and by that point you almost get the idea that the virus has taken hold, and it feeds off that last transfusion, and that's kind of where the story takes off from there. But Steve, we'll go to you for your take on the movie as a whole.
So initially watching this, I'd say the first half, I wasn't that into it, because there's some huge holes in it that just sort of took me out of the movie. Right. Once I was like, well, you know what, those aren't that big of a deal, then I actually really started to enjoy this. Just it doesn't really go into the like sort of typical horror. It's the horror of what, if you're a good person, which everybody thinks they're a good person,
Right.
having to do awful things. Like, how do you reconcile that?
And he's definitely doing that deliberately, but his character is a priest.
Yeah,
You can't
so they're
get
very
more
much
pure than that.
Right.
Exactly. They're like,
Yeah.
this is a good person that has to do awful things to survive, and not just. And it's not just there's that survival instinct that he's fighting against. So
Yeah.
how do you reconcile that? And those questions are absolutely. It deals with
Well,
it in
as,
such an amazing.
as you start to do these evil things, how does that affect you even more? Because then he not only is this a priest who's just struggling with like having to suck people's blood to survive, which he seems to find like loopholes around it by sucking people who are in comas, but now he starts to have like the sexual desires.
Sexual drive is
and-
like hugely intensified.
Yeah.
And just every sort of base desire is intensified.
Right.
And so how do you, it's not just, the vampire question of killing people. It's how do you, if your animal side or your, that sort of reptilian part of you
Right.
that comes to the forefront, can you still consider yourself a good person if you can't hold that back? And so that question, and I thought the second half of this movie explored it really well. But there's a lot of sort of, he gets the blood transfusion, and then it's never explained. There's no why. I mean, this is where maybe the way I expect storytelling to happen is different. But I expect to find out where that blood transfusion came from,
and we
like
wanna
the
know,
backstory there. It takes like 3 months for it to affect him, but then it only takes
when he turns the girl.
it only takes a few minutes to affect her.
Yeah.
So it sort of seems like, okay, there's a lot of flaws here, but
But
then
he's also
I kind
pumping
of
the blood through her.
but
I'd seen where he's like,
Yeah. He's creating a siphon through her body.
yeah.
yeah.
Did you get that far?
I don't believe so.
Get to where he
No.
turned her? Yeah.
No, I didn't get there.
Ugh. That was creepy because I have no idea how they did that physical effect when he kills her. Because it's just him squeezing her head, and then her head just snaps back,
Oh,
and it's just laying there, and you're just like,
And
oh yeah.
the audio timing was perfect when they snapped the neck on her.
Yeah.
It's something that part of this, the way the story is told, is you've seen the Vengeance trilogy. Part of it is the way that Chan-wook Park, he doesn't give you all the answers,
Everything.
especially up front. So you have to kind of, I mean, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is almost a silent film.
Yeah. Well, even Old Boy, you don't really figure out why
happens
he was placed in.
in a prison.
Well, I mean, it's the beginning. So why he's placed in this prison until the very end, and that's like a big portion of the movie. And you're like, what the hell is going on?
So it sounds
So you
like
have to be really patient.
there's a lot of, like you were saying before, a lot of cultural differences on what we see and what we expect versus maybe how just overall their storylines are.
So something I love about this, and I mentioned while we were watching it, is they don't do. It always annoys me in things like True Blood, and even Twilight, and some of the newer Anne Rice films where like vampires have like super cool powers, and they like go super fast, and they're immensely strong, or they can like read minds and stuff like this. And I love that he uses like physical effects.
Like, that's in here. Like,
Yeah.
they do have power, but the way he shows it is
The way that
very...
he shows it, it doesn't need to be like glitzier. Like there's a scene when they're running down the alley, and she's trying to get away from him. And instead of in an American film, it would have been like you would have seen the guy go like,
I've been like...
and like catch up to her, and we're supposed to think that's cool.
Little after effects, like
what's
sparkles
really cool,
after him or something.
Yeah, is you see she gets like she's a good like 300 feet away from him, and then the shot is just his feet are just right there,
Yeah.
and he just
stops.
picks her up, and she's trying to like run in the air, and so there's just this sense that it's much smarter filmmaking, and it's cool.
It's because it's filmmaking for smarter people.
Yeah.
The True Blood and Twilight and Vampire Diaries, all that nonsense is for the tweenage girl.
Yeah.
So it's playing to their lust.
So what you're saying is that women aren't smart.
Yes.
What's kind of interesting to me is actually what Brian just said. Is that's the vampire for the teen, right? And we're gonna talk about the zombie vampire later. And this is the vampire somewhat for the person who wants to think more like intellectually. So it's interesting to me just that vampires can have that. They shouldn't be something that's so culturally relatable.
Yeah.
But
Let me ask you guys something though, because it sounds like you're familiar with this director.
yeah,
And other stuff he's done. And I know at least Steve and Nate, you guys are somewhat familiar with Korean films in general. Brian, I don't know how many you've had the opportunity to see.
3, and one of them is in English.
There you go.
Three that make those watch.
I never made him watch Dragon Wars.
Do you think that either the director or the culture is lending itself to making films for people that you said are smarter, for not spoon feeding you as much information as we're used to? Because with not just the Twilight and those other films or cable show caliber movies, a lot of stuff we get fed to us. Here's the storyline, here's how it happened, and when we don't see it, we're disappointed.
They have to tell you exactly what the
Right.
vampire's powers are.
So
what he can
do you see this same kind of thing where it's a smarter way of doing it with either this director or with this culture of film?
I think not culture of film, probably culture of country, being specifically that this is a Korean film.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think. Now, Nate may want to say this is for smarter people because he likes these movies and that looks good for him. But I don't think that it's for. I think it's just a different way of telling a story that we're not used to. I mean, yeah, we expect more of the backstory, and
Right.
I want an explanation for this. But there's also, this movie felt really long, and not in a bad way. Not like, oh, it should have been shorter.
There's just
But
a lot of stuff.
it should have ended, because the way I'm used to a story being told, it goes on, it tells a lot more of the story than I'm used to it being like, there's this arc, and once the shift happens, it's over. That doesn't happen in this movie.
Right.
There's a shift, and then it keeps going, and then there's another
It's
shift.
like there's
there's
2 or
no,
3.
and I think it's just different ways of telling stories for me, anyway.
Well, and I do think somewhat for this director, there's a definite sense of just how he tells the story.
Yeah.
And he's not going to give it to you a lot of times in especially American films, we expect there to be a lot more dialogue and a lot of explanation told through that.
Right.
And we even got into this when we had some struggles with Prometheus, where not all the questions are answered, and that really bothers us. In something like this, not all the questions are answered, and they're a little bit more okay with it. Now, there are definitely some Korean films I've watched that take off from the American blockbuster, and they do explain things.
The Host, which is great, but
Yeah.
it does definitely explain things. It has that whole opening sequence where you know exactly where the monster comes
Where
from.
the monster comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I think it's it's a combination of what Brian said, definitely culturally with the Korean film and just how they shoot it, definitely how they tell stories. But the director himself has a lot to do with it.
Brian, you didn't finish this?
No.
So why are you a pansy?
It's because I couldn't mentally prepare myself to watch this movie before I went on vacation. Work's been busy this week, and I get home, and this is not the kind of movie I sit down and.
So like what?
I don't sit down and relax to this kind of movie.
Is it just
No,
is it
and
the
that's
foreign
true.
sensibility or is it the horror?
I don't think it's
That's
either
what
one. I think you hit on it because you can't relax and watch this movie.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be engaged in it because it does make you think. It doesn't let you sit back and just absorb.
Yeah.
You have to think about, like you said, there's the first arc where you find out how he became a vampire, and then there's another one, how he has to deal with it. Then there's another one, how he propagates his species.
Yeah, this is like a trilogy.
And
in one movie.
infects somebody else. I honestly, I really enjoyed it. I've seen quite a few foreign films in general. Reading subtitles doesn't bother me. And so I can get past that easily. But it was very enjoyable to see the multiple stages in this.
Yeah.
To see an origin story for the vampire. And then, okay, now, like you brought it up before, well, here's somebody who is pure. He, for the most part, does no wrong.
Yeah.
And now you watch him wrestle with these ideas on, okay, how do I feed myself? Well, okay, I've got this guy who's in a coma. And they even, in the beginning, they set up the movie by telling you, well, he had this pound cake or whatever it was, and he loved it. It was the best thing he'd ever eaten, and he gave it up to somebody. And then they even...
he wants to give up something.
Right, the priest, Sang Hyun, says later on, well, I know he's in a coma, but if he wasn't, he would give me his blood.
Yeah.
He would help feed me. And so he justifies that.
He's rationalizing.
Right.
It. Yeah. Which is kind of that. It's that first step. Yeah.
But even then, he's still like trying to be good. Like there's still this effort to be good.
Right.
And you watch his attempt slowly crumble just as the base desires take over.
And the final ending is him realizing it's a good act, but it's a horrifying act.
I honestly can't remember the end. I think by that time I was so
the last
like
thing I can remember in that
he
movie
drives
is
them. He
bouncing.
drives them to the cliff.
Oh yeah,
Like,
the 5 Days of Night ending.
He drives them as far away from civilization as he can get,
So that
she can't get back.
That was comedic. And I loved
there's
it.
these strange moments of comedy, because she keeps trying to find a way away from the sun.
I'm gonna finish it.
And he keeps,
The second half is so much
He keeps like moving it and like ripping the top of the like car off and be like, no, you can't hide in there. Yeah.
So the only reason you didn't finish it is because it's a movie that
wasn't relaxing.
you need to engage with, and you just weren't prepared for that.
Right.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
No,
if
it had nothing to do with the horrific elements. It had nothing to do with...
Because there's some pretty horrific stuff, even
with anything.
You know what I think the most horrific thing in that movie is?
was when he spews blood out of his clarinet.
That was pretty bad.
Oh.
He's just like,
Yeah.
it's just pouring out. Yeah.
The most horrific thing to me, which, like, I don't think I could ever watch the movie again because of that, is when he licks her armpit.
That's just a personal thing.
Yeah. I was like, that's like
Not the
that's the
moment.
bottom
No problem with him sucking on her toes.
No. Licks her armpit, I was like, okay, you've hit the bottom of depravity. I don't know why, that just
Because you associate it with the dictator.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned that before I saw the movie, and for the first in the beginning, like third of the movie, where it was kind of a little bit slower, I'm waiting, like, when's he gonna lick her armpit?
So if you want to know what Kevin's fetish is,
I was curious because I could see the look on your face when you were describing the scene to me, and I'm like, it bothered you.
yeah.
And so I wanted to see this, but then by that point they had already sucked toes, and then I was like, okay, well, I have an idea, not just from this movie, but from other things in the past. Asians are a lot more comfortable with fetish.
Yeah, that's true.
And so
what we would call fetish.
Right, that's true.
What we would call fetish and
fetish.
taboo.
That might
Talk
just
about
be...
old boy.
Yeah. That just might be the norm for sexual content.
It's not the norm, but they're more comfortable discussing. Like in an American film, we would be me and Steve watching this. We were like, this. I actually checked it out. It's rated R, and I was surprised. This would be probably NC-17.
NC-17, easy.
Just for some of the way and especially for the length of the sex scenes that they have.
Yeah.
And the
But it's not just that he licked her armpit. That's not that big of a deal. It's at the point at which that happens, they've pretty much done everything else. So it's like, well, his desire has become so base. It's sort of like, what else can I do? What else is left?
Well, he just wants to touch her.
Yeah, it's the moment where there's nothing else left. What can I do? What else can I do to consume this person?
Yeah.
And that's his choice. And that just I was like, dude, you got to draw a line,
I mean, the way that he does in Chan-wook Park, the way that he does sex in this film is it's so strange to me, because it's not, I mean, like you said, it's not something that you can, I mean, you mentioned you have to like engage in this film. It's not something you can even enjoy.
No.
Like you just kind of, you have, like, he's doing so much stuff with it that you can't, it's pornographic, but
depressing. It's not erotic at all.
In some ways it's erotic.
See, I found that
Yeah.
like most of the sex scenes, because it wasn't about the sex, it was about control. It's either
Yeah.
her controlling him or him trying to control her or her getting back at him. So none of the sex scenes were actually about sex. Even like the rape scene was about disillusioning, the follow.
Mm-hmm.
None of the sex in this movie was about sex. Nobody was having sex to like connect to another
There's
human
no
being.
just like fun sex. Yeah.
I disagree only with the one of the first scenes when they were down in the dress shop
Yeah.
and they were almost getting into it. From her point of view, although as I'm speaking this, I'm thinking about when she was getting it on with the damn foreman.
Yeah.
So,
Damn foreman.
but not knowing
But
her
that's
character
but that's
at that
at
point.
the end. Yeah.
Right,
That
not knowing
that
her
changes
character.
it. Yeah.
I think for him, it's a basal need.
What is it that she says? I'm shy. And she covers herself.
right.
Yeah. I'm very shy. Yeah.
But
And later on, you're like, you weren't shy.
And then she shows herself. Yeah, she says, "No, I'm a very shy
Right.
person." And then she covers herself. And like it's one of these things where he's constantly, even in those moments when you just like, honestly, there's kind of that base desire in yourself. You just want to get turned on when you see a sex scene, you know, and you just want to enjoy it. And he, damn him, he makes you think.
He makes you think, and he makes you wait, and he doesn't just show you everything. And,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like lingerie or a show or anything, the good ones don't show you everything right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they make you wait, and they tease. And it's not just the sex scenes, it's the horror scenes.
Mm-hmm.
They make you wait for them. Like we spoke about it, it's a horror movie, but it's only certain parts of it are horrific. It was an amazing take on it. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, you know, I think it's an amazing film. I in some ways it's easily one of my favorite vampire films. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
So we're doing sum ups? Is that what we're doing?
Hey, that sounded like a song
Yeah.
right there. Yeah,
It's, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a really good film. I think you have to not have certain expectations going into it, like backstory, and you basically have to put the issue of like plot holes aside and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about all this like explaining why this happens to one person and this happens to another person, and you know where this comes from. You just have to sort of sit back and allow the themes to control the film. And once you do that, it's an incredible movie. So,
Are you going to finish it?
Not now.
not now that he knows what
That was my question for you.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I've listened to you guys talk about it way too much without having finishing it, and you guys are just glowingly talking about it. I know if I go back and watch it, I'm not going to like it as much as you guys did. So I'm not even going to bother.
Well, next we're going to talk about Stakeland. All right, now we're going to take a look at Stakeland, 2010 vampire movie. This one a little bit different than Thirst. Thirst was more of the origin story. This is the post-apocalyptic story. Vampires are already ingrained. Vampire-like creatures are already part of, well, I guess, whatever's left of society at that point. And this takes us through the story of a young boy, maybe late teens, early 20s, Martin, as he's honing his craft for protecting himself and anybody else, along with his teacher, with the classic name of Mister, who is showing him the ropes, basically, and going from town to town to town as they meet different people on their journey to try and get to, I forget what they call them, but basically New Eden, Canada. We're calling New Eden. Well, that's what a couple of reviews said. Yeah, they were
magical
trying to
land of Canada.
Well, honestly, ask most Americans what's Canada. I don't know. It's just that place in
Scott
North.
Pilgrim, right?
Yeah.
So it's the place where they have free healthcare.
Yeah.
Magical land of
They make
Toronto,
films in
Canada.
Toronto?
Actually, they make a lot of films.
Make a lot
Yeah,
of films.
it's
a hell of a lot
It's
cheaper.
And it looks kind of like LA.
Yeah. But like I said, different take on vampires. And we know that Brian has watched this whole movie, so we're going to turn to you.
See, this is
Brian finishes a movie.
this is the kind of dumb, stupid horror-ish movie that you
Did you just call this movie a whore?
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Yes, I did.
multiple
No.
syllables.
You can watch
that
this
wasn't it.
movie in one night and just leave it. You don't feel bad about it, man. That's the movie's job.
It took me 3 sittings to watch this movie because my brain was like, no, you're not watching a movie this week. Screw you. But I did. I sat down and I fought through this one so I could actually be here today. Otherwise, I wasn't coming.
Much easier, I think, to watch this one.
It's a much easier movie to watch.
Yeah.
Because this is... The post-apocalyptic movie is pretty standard. You can't really screw it up. And
But there's
you haven't seen Night of the Comet.
Yeah.
That was classic.
Oh, watch it again.
No, I don't. I don't want to ruin that memory.
That's how you screw it up.
I don't want to ruin that memory.
But I mean, there's
a dancing department store scene in that movie.
That sounds right up my alley. But this has everything that you need. It has the wandering stranger. It has the mentoring father-like role who's not actually the father. And then it has other characters that you pick up along the way, and then you end up losing to death or whatever. Actually, death in every single one.
Yeah, mythology. And these are the two kind of like ways that vampires can go. The somewhat Anne Rice, where it's a human and you're exploring what they do humanistically, or they're zombie-esque kind of beasts.
Right.
You know, which is much more like this, because there's only one smart vampire in this. There's the one guy who can actually think and get around their traps, and the rest of them are like,
the guy who was converted, right?
Who was converted.
Right.
Even then, that was like he was losing it.
Yeah,
so
Jebediah Lovin.
He was
Jebediah Lovin.
Awesome.
He needs some Jebediah Lovin. Yeah.
So he's an Amish porn star. So
not many of those.
No, not very.
I mean, everything has to be done on wood carving. It takes a lot. It's a lost art. Yeah. Austin Sticky.
So I actually, talk about wood. So I actually really enjoyed this movie. Apparently, I'm the only one.
No, I enjoyed it.
I liked it quite a bit. I don't really consider it a vampire movie though. This is a zombie apocalypse movie that just the zombies can only come out at night. Like that's, I mean, really, this isn't. Vampires are not sort of mindless beasts. That's not part of that mythology. They're thinking. And even in something like 30 Days of Night, where they're absolute monsters, they're still thinking monsters. They're still aware. They just sort of revel in their animalistic nature.
The weird vampires and daybreakers, where if they haven't had blood for a while, they become zombies.
Yeah, they become, but that movie's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So, I don't...
That was a cool little film.
No, that was not even... That doesn't even rate on the...
Do you know what saves you from turning into a vampire? The sun. No, it kills you!
Yeah, that movie is awful. So I as soon as I was like, well, I'm not really considering this a vampire movie. It's more of a zombie apocalypse movie. I really liked it. It was a little sort of, the voiceover thing was a little too, like, we're trying to be profound, but all we're really doing is standing in a field going, huh, huh, huh.
Well, you know, it was
and they did that a lot.
It was very different from what I expected, because there's those voiceover quiet moments.
Yeah.
The end of it where they're just walking around the mountains. You know, it was very much my kind of like quiet, like thought-provoking film. And then
I thought this is what would happen if what's his name made a vampire
Terrence
movie.
Malick.
Terrence Malick made a vampire movie.
movie.
This is what it would be, except without the vampires.
Yeah, he would cut the he would have the vampires, but they would be separate from the humans. They would have their own story.
They'd have their own story, and they'd just stare at each other
and whisper
and go.
They'd be flowing out with capes everywhere. Yeah,
it'd be beautiful to watch.
Screensaver the movie. Yeah, but and then it's strange, because then there's these scenes where like vampires are dropping from helicopters.
Yeah,
you know, and they're just like, which was probably my favorite scene in the movie. That was cool,
using a vampire as a weapon.
Yeah, it was this sense of there are parts of this movie that I really enjoyed. And other parts I didn't. There's some really horrifying moments, but I think a lot of the characters, the supporting cast, isn't rounded out enough, and they just kind of jumble together. It's predictable in a sense. Even the character of Mister, I think his character is very interesting, but still predictable.
He's very much an archetype that
He's
what path he's going to take.
The stranger who walks into town.
And
Yeah.
he's the exact same character as Viggo Mortensen in The Road.
Right.
Almost the exact same trajectory.
As Woody Harrelson in Zombieland.
No.
No, yes.
Yeah.
He's the
Yes.
exact same character,
Yeah.
just not comedic.
No, I'm talking about
Yeah.
like the story arc.
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson does not follow the same story arc.
No, he doesn't, but he's the same archetypical character.
Okay, yeah, but he doesn't
They're
follow
both those mentors to a young teen. Yeah, who's reserved.
But Woody
they're
Harrelson's kind of the fool character.
This is the
There's a
exact
comedic.
same
It's the exact
movie
same
as
thing.
Zombie.
It is, yeah.
No, I'm talking about The Road. You're talking that he's a different character.
From Viggo Mortensen's The Road.
Yeah. That character has to die at the end. That's the arc of that character.
In The Road, yes.
Well, that archetype.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. And
He
I think
almost dies. In Zombieland, you believe what's revelatory about Zombieland is that character doesn't die. Because at the end, right, he's in the concession stand,
yeah,
with the shot, and you figure he's gonna die, right?
Yeah.
And that's because that's the track it's supposed to take, and then it just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
which I actually don't like that about the movie. But.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yeah.
because heaven forbid it does the thing that every other movie does about it.
No, there's archetypes for a reason.
But yes,
To
and
be broken, right? You know,
I think he should have died.
It's-
that
Sounds
rule
like-
about stealing cars is lame.
The what?
No, nothing. Never mind.
What?
Keep going.
Huh?
Mhm.
No, I was going to say, it sounds
Where's my
like
car, Nate?
Yeah.
if a movie doesn't follow your expected path, it's a bad movie. That's what it sounds like.
No, I think
Just,
I think
Make an
him
observation.
surviving at the end of Zombieland. It was so
No,
they
he
wanted-
should have died.
No, it was at that moment I was like, oh, so they want to do a sequel. Instead of, wow, this is an interesting way to tell a story,
No.
I just thought, oh, they want to do a sequel.
They made a comedy. He has to find it's like to them they sat there and they said, what's more important to this character, his dying or his finding Twinkies? Honest to God, what's more important to this character is his finding Twinkies. His finding that resolves his character more than anything else, because it sounds really strange, but the Twinkies are a symbolism for him for everything.
Right.
You know?
It's his son. The
Yeah,
Twinkies
it's
are
his son.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what he needs to find and what he needs to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious when in the concession stand they've been shot and you want that moment where now he needs to keep going because that's his resolution. Once he finds Twinkies, he can die.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, he can't.
Yeah.
It can't happen.
but yeah,
He finds me.
Yeah.
I was actually going to bring this up later, but yes, I honestly thought watching this movie that this was Zombieland without the comedy. This is
Oh, yeah,
this is
definitely.
like the exact same movie. You go around and
Yeah.
it's
There's a lot more people in it. Like they actually stop at town.
there's
but
more
yeah.
people, yes,
Mhm.
but
But they don't
it-
say anything.
not really.
Yeah, that's true. Then like nobody in the town's really
Yeah, there's no dialogue.
Yeah.
not a whole lot.
Mhm.
and the female character doesn't try and steal their car.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
That's definitely true.
But I mean, I was watching this movie and I'm like, okay, Steakland, Zombieland. I'm like, okay, so and it only came out a year after Zombieland came out. I'm like, there's a lot of things I'm pretty sure that this movie was inspired by through Zombieland, through other movies like this.
But this movie, like in Zombieland, there's that they're in peril, but you kind of never really expect anybody to die.
I don't know about
Because it's a comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whereas
They
in
killed Bill
this,
Murray.
yeah, but that was a
hilarious.
funny death. You know, is there anything you regret? Garfield.
Yeah.
That's a great moment. But in this, like anybody could have died at any moment, especially that when
Not anyone could have died. You know for a fact
You know
Martin
the
was never
kid,
going to die.
the kid.
Right.
And if what was it? Mister was in any sort of peril before the last 15 minutes of the movie, he wasn't going to die either.
Even then, I was unsure.
I wasn't sure about the pregnant woman either. I was actually surprised.
Yeah,
She gets taken.
yeah, that
Really
was
surprised.
horrifying.
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a couple horrifying
Oh.
scenes in this movie with
Sam-
babies.
Yeah, this guy
The
did not
opening-
like
I'm trying to
babies.
remember this because it was like
The
you said, it was 2
opening
weeks
scene
ago.
has them like he walks into the barn and that was really horrifying for me.
He's
with
holding the
tape.
baby.
No, but you said the opening scene where they come in and they're just playing this tape. Was it the opening?
That's not
scene?
the opening scene.
That's not-
That's when they find the Brotherhood for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
right.
But the opening scene when his parents get killed and slaughtered, and he walks back into the barn,
yeah.
and he looks up, and there's just this small clip of a vampire up in the corner of a barn
Oh, right.
with a baby, and it just
Yeah.
drops
Finishing
it.
off the baby.
Yeah, and honestly, that was kind of,
disgusting.
it was really, really like
Disturbing.
That went over the
disturbing.
line.
But there's this issue where it's like Mister suddenly just kind of jumps in, and that's the main issue I have with this is like people just kind of and moments just kind of happen,
Yeah.
Right.
and it relies too much on the archetypes, right? You know, I mean, honestly, the woman who's the moral compass, she just kind of shows up. You need her to be there. A pregnant woman for some kind of, she's the woman in peril. She's this sympathetic, and then the black guy,
Yeah.
which is unfortunately an archetype in horror films because you need a minority.
They didn't
But
kill
at
him
least he
first.
didn't die first.
They don't kill him first.
So that's good.
That is
Right,
good.
right.
But
And
out of the group of that 4 or 5 people, no, I guess the
Yeah.
sister dies before
yeah.
he does.
Well, and
but-
his death is kind of like surprised because he doesn't really die. He just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
He's just taken.
and then he's dead.
And then he's
Right.
dead.
I just think
Yeah.
You don't
they-
watch him die.
No, you
They
don't
do a
watch
lot of interesting things, like with the sister, just sort of they're in that situation in the camp, and she has to go in the tent with that guy, and there's
Oh, yeah.
nothing she can do.
Oh,
Nothing.
and Martin leaves
and they
her.
just and he leaves her. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like what I really liked about this movie is they present those hard choices and say, you know, these are the choices you would have to make in this situation.
Mhm.
So in a way, it's similar to Thirst. Sort of like in this situation, these are the hard choices.
Yes.
And
yes.
it explores those in an interesting way. I think it's a little too ponderous at times, but and maybe a little too like, you know, on the nose for the archetypes.
Well,
but
she just goes with him. She's like, "I hear you're going to New Eden. I'm going to
Right.
go." And it doesn't even take the time with Mister and Martin to develop their characters enough.
Oh, they had those
Yeah.
quick little 5-second fighting scenes, didn't it?
But that's not developing character.
No,
The-
no.
well,
That's wax on,
There's
wax
a-
off.
yeah.
Okay.
but there was
what are you
a
saying? Karate Kid is not a developed character?
He is more developed than Martin.
there's a sense of backstory, especially from the beginning of the movie.
There is a sense.
The beginning of the movie where he's
Yeah.
like giving his little monologue is like, you can call me Martin, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then you hear the vampire in the trunk of the car and he shoots it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it shows the vampire's killing his parents, and then it goes back to the car pulling over and he has to kill the vampire with a spear. And you almost feel like there's time between there, but you don't know how much time.
Right.
You don't
know
know-
how long they've been on the
You don't
road.
really know how long they've actually been together.
Mm-hmm.
You also don't really know how... It shows you kind of in newspaper clippings, but you don't know how the vampirism started.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to be.
I thought it was fascinating how there's kind of little like territories of people, and they have new maps now, and they draw it out, and they say,
Yeah.
all right, this is now government territory, right? Like this place is protected and safe. You know, there's actually a militia here. You know, this part.
That
is,
did them a bunch of good.
yeah, this part is Brotherhood territory,
Right.
and so it's not like as soon as in Zombieland, it's pretty much the zombies have taken over. And it's
Yeah.
just a few strugglers.
Mhm.
You know, and so there's actually small little communities that are still surviving. It's just how they survive is very different.
And I think that goes back to what you were saying. This is more of like a zombie movie. Because vampires wouldn't say, okay, well, I'll stay in my territory.
Yeah.
I won't go into your territory.
Vampires would try and trick you.
Vampires
Yeah.
are intelligent.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah. And I kept, in reading over this and watching this and trying to think back to the movie, what were some very truly vampire-like parts to this movie? Not many.
I think there's a lot of possibility in this movie, and again, I feel like we're bashing this movie. I think it's a good movie. I think it's worth watching.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of promises that just aren't really fulfilled.
The issue is once you start digging into it,
Yeah.
you start... If you try to discuss this movie in the same way that we discussed Thirst, which is rich with context and theme
Yeah.
Right.
and all these layers, it doesn't hold up.
Just because it doesn't have it.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have it, and so it just that in some ways that's a knock against it. In other ways, it's an enjoyable vampire.
It's the kind of movie that it was intended to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't really go past.
This is a good like late night Friday night. You've had a few drinks. You just want to relax and watch a horror movie.
It's not a midnight movie.
No,
I tried and it didn't work out.
Yeah, it's a little too ponderous for that, but it's definitely I'm in the mood for horror. I've seen all the good horror out. I watch this. This is a good, it'll do the job.
That's what she said.
Why would she say that?
So,
While she was looking through her drawer.
so it's,
And what did she find?
Just stop, Nate.
I know.
You're just grasping at straws. That's what she said.
Got off the sticky Amish sculptures. Let's go away from so
Got off your mom. Sorry.
So then, Brian, how would you sum up this movie?
Let's see. It's a good, stupid, fun movie that tries a little too hard to have a point that really isn't there.
Okay.
I agree. I think a little bit better if it had a little bit better characters, and if there had just been more sense to all the characters' motivations, I would have liked it a little bit better. But I liked it. Certain things just bothered me about it.
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie a lot. I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of it, so maybe that's why I enjoyed it a little bit more. It definitely is trying to be more than it is, but if you can just kind of be like, dude, you're trying to be more than you are, then I think you can sit down.
Stop trying so hard.
Yeah, stop trying so hard, basically.
Right.
I think you can enjoy it, and it's a good Friday night movie.
Yeah. No, definitely. It was fun to watch. I mean, the three of us watched it together almost 2 weeks ago. What was it last week?
It was a week.
It was last Friday.
It's been a long week.
It has been a long week.
But you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a great kind of background movie, which is unfortunate for these guys because I'm sure they didn't make. Hey, let's make a good background movie that people can kind of eat lunch around.
It's a good first effort.
Yeah, definitely. But what's interesting is Thirst only cost $1 million more to make. And it was that much better a movie. Mm-hmm. So I got to look at that and say, okay, it's a little bit of directing.
But is that
it's
in
a little
Korean
bit of,
dollars? Because I mean,
no, it's in U.S. according to them. And so that says so much to me for having the right director and having the right actor.
Yeah.
So, all right. Next, we're gonna look at The Dark Knight Rises for next week. Okay, next week we're gonna review The Dark Knight Rises, the last in the trilogy, coming out. It's been about 8 years in waiting. We're looking at a new terrorist leader, Bane, who's coming in. He's going to terrorize the city, and it brings back in the Dark Knight to try and help everybody out, even though, according to this summary here, that he's been branded an enemy by Gotham. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to this. I myself am definitely looking forward to it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it out.
looking forward to it's an understatement.
Yeah.
This is the movie of the year.
Not to me, though. I'm looking forward to it, but it's not.
Tough to say it's the movie there with The Hobbit coming out at the end of the year.
Well,
Yeah.
the movie of the summer.
I guess it depends
yeah.
upon how impacted you were by the first two, or Batman if you had a history with Batman.
Well, as far as expectations, everybody expects this to be the greatest thing ever made. I think pretty much everybody expects that out of this.
All right.
Which is unfortunate, but
I know, and we've seen a lot of films that happens. You set the bar so high that there's no way it can meet those expectations.
Well, I'm really excited for this because of Batman Begins is amazing.
yes,
It's very good. And then The Dark Knight was somehow better. And it's to me, I do think it's one of the best films ever made. I do have that belief. I do.
So
think
you're putting it up on a pedestal.
it's
and
number
waiting
14
for one of the legs to get knocked
on my
out.
flip chart. 14
Okay.
best, it's my 14th favorite. It's so amazing.
it is one of the.
Yeah.
Even though, well, by the time this comes out, I'll have an article out bashing it, but still, it is one of the greatest films ever made.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. My issues with it are nitpicky because it is so amazing. These few little things bother me.
Right.
So.
Then that's not bashing it. That's being a nitpick.
Yeah.
But in the article, I'm being a little hyperbolic. And
Well, fine, then be that way.
This is it. This is the movie I'm waiting for.
This, I wasn't waiting for this as much as I was waiting for the Avengers. I think the Avengers is on a much grander scale than this is. In order to become successful, it has to tie in 5 different characters and do it with a director who was only attached to 2 of them. And I don't know. This is the same director, same characters. We've followed these guys now for 2 movies, and in a way, it just seems easier.
Well, this is the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is which is so hard to do.
I want to see how they end it, yes.
Yeah.
But I wasn't as excited for this movie as I was the Avengers.
The other thing that I love about...
Anybody want to put a flick chart bet on whether or not he dies or breaks his back?
No.
No?
I don't know. I really have no idea. I'm not willing to put any flick chart bets on Christopher Nolan.
I know.
Yeah, because I have no idea.
I think if
I'm
Batman...
still not sure I've left the theater for Inception. Okay, I still might be there.
Hold on, let's spin
Yeah.
real quick.
I think I'm going to be disappointed if Batman doesn't die.
Now you say Batman die.
Yes.
Do you mean Bruce Wayne or do you mean Batman?
Batman.
Okay.
Yes.
I wanted to be certain.
Okay.
I don't know, because I'm willing to just to go in and see what it is that Christopher Nolan gives me, you know, because I didn't know what to expect when I went to see The Dark Knight, which is what's so cool. He doesn't really give you the plot of the film. You know, here's a bad guy, he's gonna do stuff, but you really didn't see how that was all gonna like come together. And the trailers have done that exact same thing.
Yeah.
They just got you excited, and that's it. We know bridges are gonna blow up, Bane's gonna do bad stuff. But we don't know how it's... And we know he's holding crap back. Because he did that in... He didn't show the whole pencil scene with the Joker in the trailer, which another movie or something might have done. So I'm so excited.
I think you can show that.
I don't think you can show that.
A Red Band trailer, you can.
Yeah.
I just think that one thing that Christopher Nolan's great at, in pretty much every movie he's ever done, is telling you this is what's going to happen. And then tricking you into thinking it's not going to happen. Even though we already told you it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then when you happen, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Wait a minute. He told me that's going to happen. Prestige does that.
Yeah.
Insomnia does that.
Memento does that.
Memento does that.
That's a good story.
Memento literally shows you what's going to happen.
Yeah.
By the end, you're like, I can't believe that happened. Like, it's insane.
Because
how
it
he does
starts
that.
at the end of the movie
Yeah,
and works back
right.
to the beginning. Yeah.
Those
So-
every now and then they come out, and when you see them, I love it when a movie starts out like that.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
love to see the journey they take you, to see if they take you far enough away where you forget the beginning. And that to me is a good director or a good writer if it's
Yeah.
done well.
You need to come over and watch Memento.
This is also our epic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the sense... They're long. The Dark Knight was long.
Oh,
but it
hour.
had enough. Yeah,
I thought you meant an hour. And I was like, no, this is like a 3-hour movie.
These are like in the same way that Lord of the Rings is an epic.
Yeah.
But these Christopher Nolan he's willing to put enough story in and still make a viable epic. So I'm for me this is the movie I'm most excited about this year.
Is anybody going to go see it opening night?
No.
Friday. No, not midnight.
Not midnight. We all got jobs now.
Thursday midnight? Nobody's going to go sit for the
We're all
the
responsible
trilogy
adults.
leading up to that?
I don't get out of work until after
Yes.
That's why they
Same
have
here.
sick days.
Viewers, if you start contributing, we can all quit our jobs and go see opening night, and we'll get the podcast out on Saturday.
There you go.
Support us so we can support you.
Nice.
It's all about you guys.
All right. Well, I definitely think the enthusiasm is up there for it. Looking forward to it across the board. So we'll have to see how long we go next week. We're not going to do another film because, like Avengers, this is pretty much going to monopolize the conversation. So we're just going to go deep into this. But definitely, thanks for watching this week. If you get a chance, download the audio or just check out the minisodes. You can also look... Tom's not here to mention it, but in the Rand Pad, we're going to be doing articles about Batman, a whole series of them there, so you can look for them on that. Leading up to it, I don't know if we'll get any of them out before next Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I'll have mine out by Tuesday.
Okay.
So when if this podcast is out, so is my article.
All right.
If it's not out, call Nate.
You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. Right now on Facebook, we're running a contest that sees what genre of film we're watching after The Dark Knight. There's a whole list of point rules that are very convoluted. You can. It's basically
complex. If you comment and add a movie,
2 points. 2 points if you leave a comment. 3 points if you add a movie in the
you get a point
comment.
for everything you do.
It's like a carnival.
You get 10 extra points if you have a monkey type it in for you.
Yeah, so
And you can
we have to
prove
see
it.
a video of the monkey typing.
Yes, of course. YouTube. I mean,
yeah.
it's easy. Come on.
And if you're from India, 50 bonus points. But not for your movie genre of choice, just for you.
If you subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, please vote for us or leave us a comment. And send us suggestions for buried films at buriedcinema@gmail.com.
Yeah, and you can check us out on the web. We're at www.buriedcinema.com. I just put up a calendar so you can see what we're going to be reviewing, hopefully up through the end of the year. We'll get that out. It's up. I think it has like a month and a half now. We're going to try to get everything up, and we'll update that if it changes. But you can, if there's a movie you're really looking forward to, you can see if we're going to review it. And if we don't, you can send us an email. Say, hey, I want you to do this instead.
All right. Well, next week we'll see if The Dark Knight rises at the end of the movie.
I like movies.